Okay, here is a video of mine from from October 31st, so Halloween 2007, to in Windham on the issue of uh, cause and effect.
And Mendham, well, I'm Piero. Mendham, you are very
Introducing myself.
You were not going to spend a year trying to convince me.
He told me how he didn't
no
have time for me. Maybe this was one of the times he blocked me or anything.
You were the one that
he didn't
brought
have a year to explain.
the idea that
this was
you
3 years
studied
ago.
physics
More
in school as a student, and
it was 2.5 years ago.
There was no random particles, so obviously there was no room. I mean, you made the argument for me that because you said there was no room when you looked down there closely, and there is room for randomness.
You said there was no room when you looked close.
You want to act like, but in this practical world we don't see quantum effects. I think
it's me.
We do, and also we can capture those effects. It's like saying magnetism isn't real because
I like this example, don't I? I've only been using this for
magnets because look,
I don't know, a lot longer than
magnet,
2.5 years.
It's made of atoms, but they're not aligned. You see, but we can make magnets even though they're rare in nature.
I'm just sharing.
If it's possible, we can magnify randomness in a lot of ways. And as far as quantum effects in general,
sometimes, but I'm just using the ones that convince me.
It's like the quantum effect that light can pass through a solid object. It's a quantum effect here in the real practical world. And even though you don't find glass just occurring on its own that often, there's a lot of it about now. Geiger counter. You just don't know this physics as well as you think, evidently. A Geiger counter goes click, click, click every time a photon strikes its detector. Click from the radiation.
So these are all familiar, right?
The pattern of those clicks.
These are all familiar examples.
It's not because you can't
look this up
close enough.
Why these are examples of quantum mechanics.
Is fundamentally
you could argue why they're macroscopic.
But even more bizarre, the theory seems to be that it comes off at all. The photon comes off of radioactive material at all the possible moments. Yeah, so that's a bit strange.
I mean, you're bringing up the same things too, but I've dealt with those.
That might be a way for you to get your determinism back. Because it might be that everything that's possible happens.
I'm making a list for myself.
For some reason are weaving through just one set of contiguous possibilities.
This is one I could share,
but they're all actually happening.
That's just so I can watch it.
You've made your conclusion. You said you'll make a prediction. You've acknowledged more or less that there is randomness in quantum physics because it's undeniable. It's not a subtle part of quantum physics. Every particle is a little packet of probability. It doesn't exist in a particular location. It's spread out until it interacts with some other wave packet.
That's the observation thing, just that you need
your
to
animal
interact.
Example makes no sense. You know, yeah, a duck is a duck, but every duck is individual. That's the randomness. Why would we want 1% of randomness with 99% predictability? Because that 1% is what mixes things up. That's how you mix the solution so the chemicals can even come in contact and you can have these predictable reactions in the first place. There's room for individuality. There's room for differentiation. You constantly talk about us thinking, and I don't know what you're talking about. There is no thinking if there's no free will.
Yeah.
You're just water flowing downhill.
Why would the river have to have an illusion?
Maybe the river thinks it decides which way to flow.
Oh, that's an old example too, I guess. I think in this case,
you're totally wrong about not being able to see stuff. We can use technology to see stuff, and as a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting because have you heard of the tunneling microscope? I mean, it used to be when I was a kid,
great.
We thought,
you want
we'll
to talk
never
about
get a picture of an atom because you can't,
I'll look for slit experiment summaries, but I've read.
Well, it turns out, see, in classical mechanics, you have an electron bound to a molecule or an atom of some sort. If you pull on it, if you don't pull hard enough, it won't come. It's bound by a certain amount of force, basically, that it has to be put into the system to free that electron. Well, it turns out since it's not a particle, that it's a little wave packet. Yeah, well, a particle you'd have to pull strong enough or it won't go through the barrier. But a wave, it bumps against the barrier, makes the barrier vibrate, basically.
This is really a good thing
And
to
part of
know.
the wave will go through. So, since it's a probability wave, that's a probability that it's just going to jump past the threshold with an insufficient amount of energy to do so. And they built a device based on that, and lo and behold, it worked. Because there is randomness in the universe. At least you have to give up this idea that physics doesn't support randomness. Of course it supports randomness.
That's what I've been saying, you know, and
furthermore, what is
it's
it
time.
about you guys that don't believe in free will? Why? Why do you not want? Why do you want to give up? See, I believe it's important to fight for our
this
freedom.
is the same thing too. This
So
is
I'm
where
not
we
into
get. I'm not arguing
to
from
giving up
quantum
on the
physics.
idea of will.
I'm
Now,
arguing
free
from
will,
why do you
sure,
want to give
I'm
it
not
up?
sure that freedom
Yeah,
is the
if
right
you don't
term
have
because there's
determinism
no
as an
totally
excuse,
free will.
what's your
There's
other
no
excuse?
totally unfree will.
See, I've been talking
There's
about
limits,
that. There's
yeah.
no
When you
totally
are a duck, then you're limited
free
to
will.
what a duck can be. You don't speak English. If you're a human, you don't have wings, but there's freedoms within that bracket. And this is just like the wave packet of a particle. The electron doesn't exist in a particular location. It exists somewhere within a packet of probability. Underneath that
but
is
the
100%
wave packet's kind of like a
probability. It's in there somewhere.
determined thing. You
If it's
could
not at any of the places with
be
zero
happy with that, right?
probability.
The
But it's spread
probability
out.
can be
There's an
determined.
interval
Is that
of
good
free
enough?
will.
It's not quite like
Statistically, there are
the
patterns to
determinism
how
we
much
have. It doesn't
radiation will be radiated
determines that.
by a radioactive substance. Its half-life, half of its energy should be radiated. But it won't be exactly at the halfway point. And you can't tell when or what color photons exactly will come out, though you can determine the limited selection, the limited set of possibilities of what they'll be. But not exactly. We have a constrained freedom, which we are either strong enough to overcome or not strong enough.
See, this is the issue.
Another way to put
strong
it is that some of the contexts we will be able to overcome and some we will not.
Right. Then we can discuss which are which. How
Your
about that? That's
criticism
an
of free
interesting
will
discussion.
falls really
About the
flat. And your
limitations of
idea
your
that
parent
you're
and
gonna-
your culture.
that you
Let's talk
could
about the
spend a
actual
year
limitations
and suss out.
as though they're things we can
You're
address.
making predictions about physics that is not going to be solved in the coming year. You know, you think maybe that'd be a bigger factor than if you could figure out what I'm missing. Well, it's not that I can't picture determinism. I do picture it. I think there is determinism to a certain degree. But it's not from now to the end of eternity. It's with little segments. And it's punctuated with noticeable moments of will. And I think we can insert moments of will in some of those predetermined segments as well. But sometimes, whether we like it or not, a moment of will comes. And it's as if nature asks us, what you gonna do?
You're going to
Call
answer
it
that?
faith,
What
but
are you going to do?
I've experienced these moments. I believe that is will. But is it a belief? No. It's a definition. I exist, I have an experience, and I name the experience will. Okay, so will exists. We're only asking, what's the nature? How?
Well, I think at least I showed that I've been very consistent. And I don't think those are answered questions. It's, probably time to consider answering some of those examples. So, cheers.